The story begins with the wedding of two young people taking place one day, but she was not as ordinary as she might at first appear. It seemed like it was business as usual. A beautiful bride in a white dress, and everything around her incredibly fabulous. Everything looks like it's an unquestionably flawless duke's wedding. However, you can see hatred and contempt in the gazes of the guests. No one was hiding the fact that everyone was against this wedding. There wasn't a single guest who was genuinely excited about the event. And because of that, it was hard to ignore such attention and enjoy the beautiful event. The priest began to speak his words. They sounded beautiful, of course, but they made no sense. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, everything he said won't come true. It will not work out to create a happy and good family, as it usually happens after marriage. Because on this day, a girl will marry that man who wants to destroy her because of hatred and many other reasons. Like all misfortunes, it came to the girl quite unexpectedly, and perhaps even undeservedly. In her real life, she was an ordinary girl who was unhappy. And at some point, a situation occurred that would completely change her future. She was a young and beautiful lady, and had done nothing wrong to anyone, but at some point in time, a terrible thing happened. But it turned out it wasn't the end. From that moment on, she was destined. A whole new life, a new destiny and appearance. When she looked at herself in the mirror, the girl didn't realize who she saw there. She had black hair and a completely different appearance. Of course, it is obvious that a rebirth into another body has occurred. It was a scenario she had often seen before in books. The girl she was reborn into, and who she is now, her name is Edith. It turns out that she was trapped in the book she read last night, and is in the body of a girl who was beautiful and bright, the bastard daughter of an earl. In the book, her name was Lacey Sinclair. Because of her background, she was persecuted by her family and had an unhappy childhood. Then she caught the attention of the dukes and went to live with them. A fierce competition without any concessions for the girl's attention, and this is where the obsession described in the title of the book begins. Edith's role in this novel is that she is simple, stupid, and greedy, and also a jealous and evil villain who is constantly trying to do bad things to the very Lacey Sinclair she hated. She took every opportunity to bring her down or do her some kind of mischief. It was the only thing she wanted. After all, she hated her because she felt she wasn't as beautiful as Lacey Sinclair. The girl had already been tidied up by stylists and makeup artists, so she was ready to fulfill all her plans, and immediately set out to correct her fate, in order to stay alive and live a happy life. Initially, it was necessary to right all the wrongs of the villainess whose body she was now in, one of several important things she wanted to accomplish: mending her relationship with her family, and winning their love. The girl was in a great mood, so she thought it would be easy to make up with her father in one conversation. But she was wrong. She went into his room and told him, "Good morning," and tried to be nice and polite to him. Except she imagined it much easier, and forgot that it's actually not that easy to establish a relationship with someone she hasn't talked to in a long time, and has been in conflict for a long time. Edith immediately noticed that after she entered the room, her father's mood immediately disappeared, and he was aggressive. It wasn't surprising, though. After all, this was how they'd talked to each other before, and it was silly to expect a different reaction from him. So it was not pleasant for her to hear that after she tried to talk to him normally and make up with him. And when she experienced a father's relationship with his daughter and being in her body, only then did she realize how hard it would be to fix things. She began to fear literally every look and word he said, because the only thing Edith was afraid of was that soon she would have to pay for growing up in this house, and enjoying all the comforts, and being accepted into this family. When she was a little girl, the girl had no idea that she would end up in a family where she was treated badly and not loved, much less that she should be grateful for it. This was absolutely not the family she wanted to spend her childhood in, but she had no other choice. They tried to scold her for absolutely everything, even if it was unjustified. She was punished even for no reason. Every time she was in a desperate situation where she was locked in a room for some mistake or other, it was like they were trying to find a reason to punish her or make her look guilty, even when they weren't. When Edith went out to people on the street, she always looked gorgeous and was like an advertisement for this family. And in fact, at home, she was taking out her anger on her and being treated very badly. Only that no one saw it and didn't know what was really going on in that family in relation to the girl. She was very tired of it and longed to finally know what a happy life was. When you cannot expect any criticism or aggression from the outside without reason, and feel free wherever she is. One day there was some strange situation, which did not surprise her anymore, because she was used to it long ago. Her father called out to her very loudly, and ordered her to come to him immediately. Turns out he once again didn't like her behavior, though he never said anything specific. He was also talking about how the girl had no right to make a single mistake today. There are some negotiations waiting for her, where she has to say she'll take some 3 maids with her. And if she does, she can move on to the next stage. Just what that means is still unclear. Because everyone at home yells at her and hates her, she is very rarely in a good mood and can't even find the energy to smile at anyone. One day she decided to analyze all the information she remembers about this family. Duke Ludwig and Count Triegelhoff have been rivals since their childhood. The two families used to be about on the same level, but at one point Duke Ludwig's family made a big contribution, hence the title of dukes. It is after this that Count Triegelhoff thinks that the title of duke has been brazenly stolen from him, and Duke Ludwig has received it undeservedly. That's why he wants to marry Edith off, so she can find information that will help destroy the reputation of Duke Ludwig's family. The situation was very difficult, and she really didn't like the fact that she had to fulfill someone else's plan that she didn't need or care about. So she needs to escape her fate and finally start living the life she dreams of. The day had come when they must all come together to visit Duke Ludwig, and it was one of the most responsible days in recent memory. Edith could not understand why she was obliged to help this man, her father, if he treated her so terribly. Just because they welcomed her into their family doesn't mean they have the right to treat her so badly. After all, it was their decision, and now she has to pay for something and be grateful. It was time to approach the mansion, and in the meantime they were taking in all the sights around them. And there was no denying that it was really beautiful and well-maintained. After a while they were met by the butler and told that the Duke and Duchess were waiting for them inside. He then offered to guide them and asked them to follow him. Another proof has just occurred that, in the presence of other people, the father treats Edith hypocritically, as if he loved her very much. But the girl realized that he was just trying to appear to be something he wasn't, showing a good relationship with his daughter. It was unusual for her to see her father in a good mood, though she realized it was just an act that wouldn't last long. As she stood there, she couldn't believe she was seeing these characters live, and now she was standing in front of them. They were greeted by their hosts and invited to sit down, as it wouldn't be long before the food arrived and the meal could begin. Edith was looking at all the people present at this time, and noticed that they were incredibly handsome, such as this guy, or this girl, who is the same Lisi that the villain hates because of her incredible beauty. And it turns out the man who was sitting next to that beautiful woman is Edith's future husband. When she saw him, she felt a special energy emanating from him. And it's as if it's immediately clear that this man is capable of some very bad things that the girl wants to avoid, and not let anything like that happen. Even judging by his appearance, it is clear what kind of person he is. His facial features and his gaze speak about it. When you look at it, you get the impression that it was better not to have done it. And the mere sight of him makes you a little scared, especially when he's not in the mood. So one had to calm down, because nothing bad had happened so far. And you should also try to give the impression of a nice girl who doesn't suspect anything. Meanwhile, the food had already arrived and everyone was invited to the table. You could see that the hosts had taken care of it and everything looked beautiful. Edith wanted to try everything because absolutely every dish was incredibly delicious, and it wasn't impossible to stop. Meanwhile, a conversation had begun about Edith moving into the mansion soon, and wanting to take her own maids with her. But the owners didn't quite understand what it was for, and told of their maids being the best, and they would be as good as any other. You don't even have to doubt it, and you don't even have to worry about their professionalism. Except that the girl's father was so worried that he completely failed to notice how insistent he was in his request, and it looked a little uncultured from the outside. They tried to politely refuse him, but he kept persuading them that he was right, and it was best not to argue with him. This behavior seemed a little strange to those around him. After all, no one expected him to behave this way when he was a guest. So the girl decided to remedy the situation a bit and take matters into her own hands. She said that there was no need to take her father's words seriously, as he feels strongly about his daughter getting married and wants her to be happy. And from that moment the conflict began. The man could not stand the fact that they tried to correct him and settle the situation, and didn't even pay attention to the fact that the girl was only trying to do what was best. But once again he wouldn't even listen to her and started yelling at her anyway, even though he was actually wrong. But he tried to defend his opinion and show that only he had the right to decide something in this situation. Edith began to realize that they would create more problems with this behavior, and maybe they would just get kicked out after this. That's why you need to fix things as soon as possible, because they certainly don't deserve anything good with this behavior. She tried to convince her father that she knew what she was doing, and just asked him to trust her. A week later, she showed up for her own wedding and wondered what she was up to, whether to do her father's bidding, or to start living the life she wanted, and finally feel free. She realized it would be over after they exchanged rings. And this was the most important moment she had been waiting for, because there was no father around to control her, and she could do whatever she wanted. At one point she looked at her fiancé and wished for just a second that he would start being nice. Even though she knew it was impossible, she still kept hoping for it. She understood him, for it was very hard for a man like him to smile and be happy when someone was looking at him. So it had to be done quickly, and after that it would be over. But this moment was not without a strange situation. When it came time to put each other's rings on, the groom was able to do it for her. Except what happened next is really impressive. Because he doesn't like someone touching him, an unexpected situation occurred. He took his ring on his own. He didn't let her take it, even though she was supposed to do that. And he decided to put a ring on his own instead. She did not understand this act, for was it really so distasteful to him if she had done this action? Such an act offended her greatly, for she had not expected that he could ruin everything at such a moment. And such a thing she will definitely remember for a long time, because it is impossible to forget and forgive. In spite of what had happened, Edith didn't so much, and got upset because she didn't want this wedding and a good relationship between them anyway. So it was necessary to just try to ignore such attention, because in this situation it was completely unimportant to her. In that moment, she realized the kind of man she would have to live with, and what he was really like. Until that moment, she couldn't even imagine him being so rude. And he doesn't think he's doing anything to offend her. A life where she would enjoy every day, not worry about being hit or hurt by anyone. That's exactly what she dreamed of. And from then on, she will be able to be completely safe and enjoy the comfort she will get in her new home. It was unusual for her in the beginning to feel like a free and happy person. And when she realized that now it would always be like this, she was very happy about it every time. Suddenly someone knocked on the door and asked if they could come into her room. It turned out to be Lady Lissy Sinclair. Edith immediately asked how she could help her. This pretty girl had come to tell Edith something, and at first sight it seemed as if she were a little frightened or wanted to tell something bad. At this point, Edith remembers that she remembers such a moment in the book, and since she was the villain, she needed to maintain that image. After the marriage ceremony, Lizzie went to Edith's house to apologize for Callion's rudeness. However, her apology had the opposite effect, and made Edith very angry, as she couldn't blame her fiancé for his behavior, so she decided to vent all her anger on Lissy. At this point, she immediately started yelling at her and asking her how she even dared to wear a white dress to someone else's wedding. At least it was a really good reason for her to yell, because Lissy had really done the wrong thing by wearing a white dress to the wedding, didn't even have to think of anything. Despite the fact that Edith yelled at the girl, Lissy kept apologizing for Callion's rudeness, and said that despite what he appears to be at first glance, he is actually a very kind and good person. Edith was actually embarrassed for yelling at her, for how could anyone be angry with such a nice girl? But despite that, she still tried to stick to her villainous image towards Lissy. Except it didn't always work out, because she had just started sticking to the image, and sometimes it was almost impossible. After all, she's not angry enough to express aggression at someone who is not guilty of anything. She realizes how unpleasant it is from her own experience. So she has made the decision that she only has the right to be angry at those who deserve it. And because she made the decision that she had the right to communicate normally with this girl, she immediately felt better and more comfortable talking to her, and one could relax and not pretend to be something she wasn't. But she could only afford such things with people who were really good and had nothing against Edith. At one point, Lissy realizes that she has taken too much of Edith's time, and immediately apologized to her for it. But Edith said there was nothing wrong with it, so it was okay. After that, they said their goodbyes and it was time to rest after a hard day. The girl knew exactly what she needed. So without a second thought, she arranged a perfect evening of relaxation. She only dreamed of taking a bath as soon as possible. Every time she relaxed and enjoyed her comfort, she was very grateful for such a fate and for the fact that she could now live a happy and safe life. After all, nothing is required of her now, and she can do anything she wants. It's what she's dreamed of all her life. And when it all came to fruition, she couldn't believe it was actually happening. As suddenly her husband comes in and says something nice for the first time, namely that she's looking pretty good right now. She hadn't expected that, since the story said he wasn't supposed to be stopping by her place right now. So because of the surprise, I got very embarrassed and didn't know what to answer him. and I told him that I hadn't expected him to show up. To this he said, "Have I no right to go into my wife's room? After all, she is not a stranger to him, and he has the right to do whatever he wants, especially since he is in his own home." Edith couldn't even imagine him wanting to talk to her after refusing her touch during the wedding, but he certainly couldn't justify his act. When he was mad at her, she couldn't stop thinking about how handsome he was, even when he was in no mood. Besides, she didn't have the strength or desire to answer him exactly as he did, with anger and rudeness. Afterward he asked, "Is she really going to sleep in this room?" Though it sounded a little weird, like she had to sleep somewhere else so he couldn't see her. After he left, the girl couldn't understand what he had even come for. Kalyan didn't explain anything and just silently walked away unexplained. On the way he was met by Lisi, and asked why he wasn't with his wife right now. He knew full well that Lisi was asking this to possibly help their relationship and do something good for them, so he told her everything, as he trusts her, and has no doubts about telling her everything. Calix said during the conversation that Lisi has one problem. She always thinks well of people and doesn't see anything wrong with them, even when it's obvious. And what other people immediately notice, she may not see, and think that in fact all people are good. Guy tried to explain it all to her so she wouldn't think too well of Edith. Afterward, Lisi told how Edith yelled at her for wearing a white dress to her wedding. And of course, he was on Lisi's side in this situation, as they've been socializing and trusting each other for a long time. It was evident that he was dead set against his wife, and never missed an opportunity to accuse her of something. For example, for the dress she wore to their wedding. Turns out he didn't like the dress or the bride. But still, Lisi tried to say that he shouldn't talk about his girlfriend like that. After all, she hadn't done anything bad to him. Lisi doesn't understand where he gets such hatred for his own wife and how he can say such things about her. Even though she respected Calix, she still stood her ground and wouldn't change her mind. That was very right of her. At one point he says that she, of all people, should understand how he's feeling right now. Just what that could mean is still unclear. Suddenly they hear someone coming toward them. Perhaps it was his brother, and he wondered why the two of them were standing here alone and not resting. Lisi said hello to him and told him that it was really time to go to bed. Except it looked like Calix wasn't exactly happy to see him and wanted to talk to Lisi about something. The next morning came, and for the first time in a long time Edith felt that she had slept well and felt fine. It was strange to her that in such a short time she was able to get enough sleep, and woke up early enough without an alarm clock. After all, she used to be able to sleep for hours and still feel tired as a result. Her good condition must have been influenced by her calm and stress-free life. Edith remembered that she had important business to attend to. She must mend relations with her husband's parents, and consolidate her success with them. She remembers that they treated her well initially, but there is a need to maintain a mutual understanding between them, and preferably as soon as possible so they realize how important it is for her to be on good terms with them, and she is willing to do something about it. Plus, she realizes that it's far more important to listen to the Duke and Duchess than to their son. Therefore, if a girl wants to stay here for a long time, first of all it is necessary to communicate well and maintain mutual understanding with these people. If she lives quietly and peacefully with them, she can enjoy the comforts and conveniences of a luxurious life for a long time. So one must gain their trust, and to do so, she decided to greet them first thing in the morning. Plus, she won't have to cook or clean anything in the mansion because there are maids for that. And all she has to do is pretend to be a nice daughter-in-law. But first she must tidy herself up, and in this she asked the maid for help. She realized that she absolutely did not have to work hard or do anything, so being a good daughter-in-law was too easy. The main thing is not to quarrel with the hosts, and to look dignified in their presence. Edith thought for a long time about which dress she should wear after all. Some of them were too inappropriate, and it was a good thing she realized that, because over just one dress you could ruin everything without starting a conversation. Since she realized that she had to be careful about this choice, she asked her assistant to pick out the most appropriate dress. Edith was surprised that the assistant was too indifferent and kind of strange, because after the conversation just silently turned around and walked away. But the girl tried not to pay attention to it. Just as suddenly, she realizes that she forgot about one very important point yesterday. Last night was the exact night she and her husband were supposed to be together. But since he had left, Edith decided it was his own fault, and she had done nothing wrong. It is known that the plot of the book stated that Kalyan was in love with Lisi, but she didn't know it. Now I can see why he was unhappy yesterday when someone interrupted their conversation. Only that's what Kalyan was there for yesterday. If he didn't care about his wife and he doesn't love her, It was very strange of him because he never explained anything. Anyway, she didn't mind seeing his handsome face again. When she was thinking about it all, she didn't notice the time had passed, and the assistant had prepared her outfit and done her hair. The most important moment has arrived. It's time to welcome the Duke and Duchess and ask how they're doing. The girl wanted to maximize her good impression in their eyes. Callion's parents noticed that the girl was too nervous and said she had nothing to worry about. She was very pleased that they cared enough to make her a cup of tea. Also, Edith wanted to know if they knew that their son had slept in the other room tonight and hadn't even stayed with her. At one point, his parents started a conversation about whether she knew at least some of the duties of a mistress of an aristocratic household, and it was good that the girl remembered some memories from the book and could easily answer that question. She said she knows how to manage cash flow and organize documents, so if they have a system like that, she can figure it out and will take it on as soon as possible. After such a question, Edith realized that these people did not fully trust her, and the Duke asked that to see if she was here to pick up some documents for herself. So she replied if she didn't deserve their trust, they could teach her something else, and she would gladly do it to be useful. The Duke and Duchess were surprised, and they enjoyed talking to such a well-mannered girl who understands everything. The Duchess even complimented her upbringing and manners, then asked for help after 2 weeks. Edith, of course, agreed, and asked for an assistant to be assigned to her, if possible. It was so she could find out what kind of man he was and why he left his wife the night after the wedding. It was time to say goodbye, and the girl said she had to go. When she left the room, she was relieved because she was so worried and afraid to say the wrong thing. Some assistant came up to her and asked if she was okay, to which she said she was just a little nervous. Turns out to be the Duchess's assistant who just needs to give a tour of the mansion. They met and greeted each other. This is the person in charge of the paperwork, and for some reason he's not mentioned in the book, and neither is the maid. And because she didn't know anything about them, she was a little uncomfortable, because she didn't know what to expect from them. But since they haven't done anything wrong yet, they don't arouse any suspicion. The girl tried to communicate well with them, and did not pretend to be a little afraid of their presence, for perhaps they were against Edith, and were not quite what they might seem at first sight. So they need to be checked out and trusted. First place they go is the jewelry vault, where absolutely every piece of the Duke and Duchess's jewelry is kept. And they also went to a huge library with a collection of very rare books. This place is really impressive, and when they went there, it felt like it had a special atmosphere. So Edith decided to ask if she could go there anytime she wanted, or if she needed someone's permission. It turns out that anyone in the family can go in there at any time. The same goes for the artwork. That was really good news. After the library, they went to the art room. This room was special, and felt like there was an incredible atmosphere there as well. It would take a very long time to see everything, and it would be impossible to stop looking at a work of art. At which point the butler says we can call it a night. The girl thanked for the tour, because it was really impressive and very beautiful. She didn't even notice the time had passed. Plus, it was really nice to hear him say something. It was like he had spent his whole life practicing to talk beautifully about something. But he wasn't used to being able to be thanked and praised by anyone. So he just said he was doing his job, and he could show the rest another day. But as they still had time on the way back, he told of the place by which they would be traveling. It's usually used for tea parties because it's the perfect place for it. And when the Duke and Duchess have guests over, they're usually there to greet the guests and talk about something. Plus, it's very beautiful and nice to be there. Except it looks like the girl wasn't really listening to the information, and was looking somewhere else at the time. The butler notices he's not being listened to at all, and doesn't understand why. Edith stopped and started looking somewhere. She must have been interested in something, or seen something interesting. Turns out she saw her husband in the company of Lisi, so she stopped to look at it. It was an unpleasant situation for her, because instead of being with her, he's spending time with some other girl. But since Edith wasn't really in love with him, it wasn't so hard and hurtful for her to see it. But it was still frustrating to see her husband socializing with someone without even once coming to see his wife to see how she was doing. It's amazing that he sometimes smiles in the company of other people. For example, with Edith he is constantly rude and wants to go somewhere all the time. But that must be totally unimportant to her, because the only thing she wants is to simply enjoy all the comforts and privileges of the mansion she lives in. So she continued talking to the butler as if nothing had happened. She decided to change the subject to how beautiful the weather was outside. The butler said he had a lot to do, so the girl said she wouldn't keep him busy anymore. He's already given her enough time and shown her a lot of interesting things. After the tour, The butler went to his master to tell him how it had gone. He tried to give as much detail as possible as to how the girl behaved and what she was interested in. During the excursion of the Duke asked if anything strange was going on. The butler said it was nothing of the sort, and the girl had behaved with great dignity, and also remembered that there was only one situation on the way back down the corridor. He told how Lady had witnessed her husband and another guy having tea with Lisi. This information surprised Kellyanne's father a little bit because he didn't expect his son to do something like this. He told him to behave himself, and said it must have been very unpleasant to see her husband flirting with another woman the morning after the wedding. Except that she was acting really weird, and she didn't show it at all, that his behavior might have upset her in some way. His father didn't expect this behavior from his son, and didn't know what to do about it, and I also didn't understand why the girl wasn't upset at all. Although maybe she just didn't want to cause a scandal. Butler added that her behavior seemed ambiguous. Over time, everyone began to notice it. In the meantime, the girl had gone to lunch, but there was something unusual for her. Is that she has someone cleaning up after her all the time, and she doesn't have to do it. Edith, in turn, tried to make the assistants' work easier somehow, and offered sometimes to go away for a rest or lunch, because she saw how tired they were getting. Perhaps it was because Edith was uncomfortable having someone else do some of the work for her, and she wasn't used to that kind of life. She'll probably get used to it, though, and she won't think it's weird anymore that someone will clean up after her or bring something for her. During lunch, she realizes what's left is to build a relationship with Lisi. Lisi, the girl who is destined to become the main character, against all odds, before she came to the Ludwig family. Her life was not easy. Her brother and sister were constantly trying to humiliate her. Her life was really difficult, filled with stress and bad attitudes towards her. Then somehow the girl attracted the attention of Duchess Ludwig. The Duke and Duchess were outraged at the mistreatment towards this sweet little girl, so they insisted that the girl start living with them from that point forward. Her parents agreed to it, but they'll regret it later, because they've lost the chance to be related to the Dukes. If you pay attention to the plot of the book, the result is that there isn't a single person left unhappy, except that Andy was the exception. The girl had a lot of trouble in her life from start to finish. At the company where she worked when she was in her present life, she was often treated badly by senior staff. And one day after work, Edith saw her boyfriend walking to the hotel with some other girl, and she never spoke to him again. The same day Edith was walking down the street and thinking of how she would start home to read some book about romance, and it would last a very long time, when suddenly a terrible thing happened. She fell down the stairs, and I wondered what her brother did after he pushed her, and she died. And whether her parents were sad, she very much doubted it, because she knew they probably cared more about her big brother than she did after what happened. But now she had to take care of her own destiny and mend her relationship with Lizzie, whom she'd seen through the window, watching her sit by a tree and read a book. Edith decided that instead of being sad about the past, she needed to make sure that the future would be much better. Except she didn't expect to see her husband walk up to Lizzie to ask how she was doing. This time his behavior was already abnormal, and looked disrespectful to his wife, who at this point is looking at him and seeing everything. It's amazing that he can only smile when he talks to Lisi. With everyone else he shows no emotion, and is almost never in a good mood. Of course it offends his wife to see him socializing with someone in a good mood while he is never nice to her. But there's nothing you can do about his character and his actions, because he does what's written in the script, and you can't fix him. It's gotten to the point where he's being reprimanded for not talking to his wife, for not talking to Andy, and that's wrong. At one point she overhears Killian being directly asked why he doesn't try to talk and spend time with his wife. And Andy realized that she wasn't the only one who'd noticed how he'd slowly started to forget about her and turn his attention to another girl, when suddenly a cup breaks and there's some kind of scandal. One girl didn't know what was going on. I don't know if he's crazy or what he's doing all this for. She was shouting about how she could have been chosen among hundreds of other women, or surely there must be someone much better, except which girl she was talking about was still unknown. The girl who says all this, her name is Layla Sinclair. She's the Earl of Sinclair's youngest daughter, and she seems to be unhappy about something. It turns out that she was so nervous and indignant about Edith marrying Killian that she told Damien Sinclair, the Earl of Sinclair's eldest son, about it. She was very angry about what she found out. But that guy said that it seems like someone has a hobby of picking women who are not as high status as them, and it's not surprising at all. And afterward he asked, what was the use of breaking the cup? for it was really unnecessary. Then she decided to see if her brother knew any interesting information about the wedding and their relationship, for she wanted very much to find out all the details, and perhaps interfere with their happy life. Although their life together is hard to call happy, but still the girl decided to find out as much information as possible. Layla wanted to know any information so badly that she wasn't even going to let her brother go until he told her something interesting. And it's like she's convinced that there's something he's not telling her, and there's something he's not telling her, and there's something she can't know. Layla asked that there be no stalling, and in order to get everyone out sooner, he could start telling all of the secrets, but he tried to calm her down and slowly started talking. To begin with, he asked them to think for what reason and for what purpose they were married, and what benefit there might be to both parties who married their children in doing so. In addition, Count Triegelhoff gets the right to distribute the iron ore that is mined in the mines. In other words, thanks to the wedding of the children, he has the raw materials to produce the necessary products. So it was advantageous for him to marry his daughter to Calixa. And then Layla started to realize what was going on. Although her brother said that it was elementary things that were already clear, and it didn't even need to be guessed, everything was already visible. Except it's going to be a big problem if someone has an agenda that could hurt someone, or if it's more serious than that. After that, Damien told a lot more different information that didn't make any sense to Layla, and she still doesn't understand what this is all for, because it's probably much more serious than that. At one point she got angry and asked why he told her all that, because she didn't understand it anyway. But it turns out her brother did want to explain that the fun was just beginning, and asked her what she thought the catch might be, and what one side was hiding. Things might not be what they really look like, because not many people know what really happened in Edith's family, and how hard it was for her to be in the same house with her father. Everyone saw how easily he yelled at her when they were visiting the first time, but no one paid attention to it, and people thought it was just excitement. No one even thought about the fact that this happens all the time and the girl has to put up with it all the time. Damien has witnessed many times the girl's father constantly yelling at her and putting some conditions on her. It suggests that he wants to do something, and he didn't just order his daughter to marry Killian. He has a hunch that it's more serious than one might think, and one should be wary of what he's up to. All that remains to be done is to watch, and watch Edith's behavior closely. Meanwhile, the Korean went on to give Edith a tour and show her everything she had not had time to see last time, and she gladly agreed to do it, because she really enjoyed learning new things and looking at the incredible beauty in the mansion. I'm surprised it took them a week to see the mansion, and even after all that time, they didn't have time to see everything in it. So the girl asked what to do with the rest of her free time. The butler said it was no longer worth worrying about, because someone had taken care of it in advance. It turns out that the Duchess will give her a job starting today. Edith could not have imagined that it would happen so quickly, and she could start today. The girl was very happy about it, for it had been incredibly hard for her to sit idle all this time, and now she would have some work to do, and Andy would no longer have to think about what she should do, and think of ideas of pastime. So she decided to go to the Duchess to find out all the information she needed and get down to business. But before she did, she asked the butler where her office was, and then she remembered to thank him. For thanks to him, she now had a good grasp of the big mansion. For without him, she would have had a long time to look for the right room. It was unusual for him to be thanked, because usually no one praises him for his work, and he was not used to hearing such things. Plus, in a whole week, it would be weird if the girl didn't remember anything. When Edith walked into the Duchess's office, saw her talking to Lisi. They greeted each other, and Edith was anxious to know what work from this day forward she would do to. And the girl was happy that they would be working together, which is great, because they communicate very well and can help each other out. If they suddenly have any problems, it will be much easier to deal with them together. The Duchess noticed that these girls were conversing well, and were very glad to meet each other. Edith noticed that she had been too absorbed in talking to Lisi, that she had forgotten to say hello to her mistress, and she was ashamed of it. But the Duchess said that the girl could not worry about it, because nothing bad had happened, then asked Lisi to prepare the papers that had been worked on earlier. The girls set about the task, and they both coped well enough with everything. Edith surprisingly even from the first time she understood what was to be done, and made no mistakes. Meanwhile, the Duchess was getting nervous, saying that the time had passed too quickly. Perhaps she was in a hurry or had an important appointment, Lisi decided to tell Edith what it was all about, since she probably hadn't heard anything about it, and she must have missed it for some reason, so she doesn't know what's going on, a situation she remembers in the story, and she remembers what's supposed to happen at that moment. It turned out that the Duchess had new business, and because of this had to postpone all work to tomorrow, so the girls were free, and could go about their business or rest after work. Since I have a lot of important things to do tomorrow, I should have taken advantage of it and gone on vacation, because it happens very rarely, and Edith was very much in luck, for she was released quickly enough to go about her business. She had an unplanned day off, and it was a very good opportunity to spend it the way she wanted to spend it. But it turns out it didn't happen the way they thought it would, and they were asked to help with design choices, so they had to stay and do whatever they were asked to do. Edith was sure that the option that Lisi would suggest would be better, and in any case, the girl thought she was bad at choosing some design. But since she wanted to get out of here and go on vacation, she had to help and do whatever they asked. Except that it was really hard to decide what looked more beautiful and what would be the right choice, because it is very responsible. Edith knew that the girls around her were much better at design, so she was afraid to offer her own suggestion, and she didn't understand why the other girls were so much quicker at picking out designs than Edith. Besides, what Lisi chose, the Duchess was always praising and liking. She was saying that Lisi made a great choice, and that it was a perfect fit. Edith wanted to be as knowledgeable about design and choose the very best designs. It turns out that Lisi chose a dress that matched the skin tone of the Duchess, so the blue dress perfectly emphasized her appearance. It was time to voice her option to Edith, but she could not choose anything, and hesitated for a long time whether to suggest anything. But surprisingly, she did pick one dress, and she was ready to show it off. It becomes more and more interesting to see if the Duchess will like Edith's choice, and how well she was able to do her task. When it came time to show her choice, Edith realized there was no turning back, and she had to choose something anyway. Her version was a little different from what the Duchess was usually used to wearing, and she had less of a chance than the other girls. After all, few people can like this combination of colors. But Edith was sure that this is not a bad version of the outfit, in which the Duchess will definitely be able to surprise everyone and look different from usual. Mistress appreciated the dress, said it was beautiful, but she was afraid it would make her look too bright. Edith was sure that for people who are older, it is necessary to wear fashionable and colorful things in order to always look great and surprise everyone with their images. In any case, the girl did not have the goal of choosing the best dress. She just wanted to fulfill her task, and at the same time not to upset the Duchess. Despite all the worries, the Duchess was very happy with this option, and said that of course she would trust her choice, because it's usually worn by women who are a little younger, and the choice seemed like a compliment to the Duchess. After that, the Duchess proposed to choose some dress that would suit Lisi, not her, and this proposal surprised the girl very much, for she was honored that the Duchess had suggested such a thing to her. The woman from that point on started picking out some dress for the girl herself, and said there were some pretty good options that would suit her just fine. Edith joined this choice. She suggested another option, and said that the color of some of the dress doesn't suit everyone, but Lisi has very light skin and pink cheeks, like strawberry milk, so it will look great on her. During the conversation, the Duchess praised Edith's sense of style, and said that she was perfectly able to choose a dress and image for anyone, and also noted that the girl must have a talent, and the woman did not regret asking her opinion. Edith could not even suspect that she would do her job perfectly, and delight everyone around her with her ability to choose clothes for each girl based on her appearance. So they already had 5 options, and while choosing the best image, they had a good time and talked. It felt like they had improved their relationship a lot thanks to this meeting, and it was very good for Edith. As suddenly the Duchess offers to choose a dress also for Edith, and then apologized that she forgot about the girl, because she also needs to choose a suitable dress. The woman did not understand how she could forget about it, but the girl said that she did not have to choose something, as it is enough to change a little the dresses she already has, in order not to buy some new expensive clothes. And the assistant gladly agreed to adjust a little the clothes that were already in Edith's closet. As she had many dresses that were too inappropriate for meeting respectable people, she had something to fix, for because of this, she could not put them on and wear them to an event or outing. It turns out that one of the main rules of survival of the villain is to completely change her image, so it was necessary to remove all the jewelry, a little rearrangement of small details, and thus it will be possible to create a completely new dress. The assistant said that over time, Edith has noticeably changed her preference in the clothes she wears, because previously the girl was very fond of a lot of rhinestones and jewelry on the dress, and considered the more of them, the better. These changes were noticed by both the Duchess and Lisi. It was surprising to them how much the girl had changed in absolutely everything, and her preferences had changed beyond recognition. After some time, the girls coped with all the tasks they had received earlier, and it turned out that it was not as hard as they had originally imagined. Of course, there is a lot of responsibility in the work, but at the same time this work is very pleasant, and everyone does what he likes to do. At some point, Edith remembered that something could be done with the diamonds that would be removed from her dress. For example, to collect them and sell them. It would be better and more right than they would lie idle or be lost in time. Besides, while talking to everyone, Edith noticed how the Duchess tried to establish relations with the girl. It was very noticeable, and besides, the woman did not hide it, and openly demonstrated it. After Edith was free and about to go to her room to rest, she saw Callian standing near her room, and it was very surprising, for he had not wanted to see Edith or be near her before. He certainly couldn't come for no reason, and maybe this time he had something really serious. Or a miracle happened, and this person changed and decided to apologize for his behavior. She tried to ask what Callian had come for, and what he wanted. In response, he just said to follow him, and not to ask too many questions. Because of this girl, it was a bit strange to agree to his request and go somewhere with him. Because this man had treated her very badly before, and now he was asking her to go out with him. It turned out that all he wanted to say was that Lisi had invited her to a tea party, and the miracle didn't happen, although she had hoped it would happen. But it wasn't really in the story, and maybe he made up an excuse for Edith to go with him. But there's a chance that Lisi did call them to tea, and asked Callian to take Edith so he could spend some time with his wife. But it's not going to help their relationship because Callian's not in the mood to communicate with his wife, and he's not going to do anything about it. Despite the fact that between them a lot of misunderstandings and problems in the relationship, Edith does not stop admiring the appearance of Callian, because in fact he is a real ideal of beauty and looks gorgeous. When they first spoke to each other, not surprisingly, it turned into a conflict, and Callian didn't hide the fact that he didn't want to talk to her at all. The girl doesn't even expect to change her opinion of him during the conversation, and hate him even more after what he dares to say to her. Before they went to tea, he stopped her and decided to say something to her. Namely, to warn her in advance what she should do and what she should not do, and as if he were ordering her to behave better. He said that she should be careful with her words in the presence of Lisi. Did he think that the girl would somehow communicate with her badly and say unpleasant things about her? Maybe he did not know that girls communicate with each other perfectly well, and there will be no conflict. He also hinted that Lisi was a stranger to her, and he wouldn't allow her to be treated badly by his wife. And as strange as it sounds, he really meant it. The girl couldn't even imagine that the first thing he said to her was that she should never dare to hurt Lisi. Edith asked him directly, did he really think she would want to quarrel with anyone, or have a bad relationship with anyone? She had no idea of behaving like that, though she had every right to after the way he treated her. Callian at that moment was a man with whom it was impossible to communicate, and I just wanted to leave, not to hear any more hurtful words from him, because it becomes clear and obvious how much he does not care about his wife, and it is absolutely normal for him to treat her very badly, though she in turn, unlike him, always tried to communicate with him as politely as possible, and did not allow herself what he allows himself to her. Edith certainly does not deserve such a terrible attitude to herself, because she did nothing bad to him. In addition, she has to tolerate his character, and pretend as if everything is normal, although it is absolutely not so, and every time she is insanely offended when she sees such a bad attitude, and realizes that nothing cannot be fixed. He likes another girl. She tried to ask him why he was so rude to her, but it was impossible to get a concrete answer out of him. But after many attempts, she said she wouldn't let him treat her like that, and she wasn't the kind of girl who would tolerate it. So she turned and walked away from him in silence, because it was pointless to listen to what he was going to say to her, for there would be nothing good in what he said, and it was foolish to count on it, for he was a man who would never manage it. It was time for tea, and everyone arrived at the table. Callian must have been very surprised to see how well the girls talked to each other, and there was no point in bullying his wife in case she said one bad word to Lisi. All the time they communicated perfectly and easily found common topics for conversation. Between them there was no conflict, and even a hint of bad talk. So Edith's husband was very much mistaken, and surely realizes that in vain insulted his wife, because she was not going to do anything bad. Some guy asked how Edith was adjusting so well to life here at the mansion. She hasn't had a single mistake yet, and she's doing a great job. And also asked if she was taking too little work on her shoulders, because at some point it might get boring and the girl might change her mind about taking on so much responsibility and tasks. Because she is very young, and why she and her husband shouldn't go on a trip after the wedding. Apparently this guy didn't quite understand what kind of relationship they were in, and didn't know that Killian tries to see his wife as little as possible and practically talks to her, so it's not even worth dreaming about. At this point Killian decided to change the subject because he didn't like to talk about Edith. So he asked how about doing things at the mansion as soon as possible, because winter was over, and there was a lot to do. When suddenly this guy asks Lisi if she wants to help him, since she's been saying she wants to go on a trip. The girl did not even suspect that she could be offered such a thing, as it had never happened before, and it was the first time she was offered to go on a trip far away, except that one of them was against Lisi going somewhere and going on a trip for a long time. And of course he tried to talk her out of the idea. And of course this person who didn't want to let Lisi go was Callian. He didn't even hide the fact that he didn't want her to leave, though he didn't really have the right to order her decision and say his opinion about it. When these three are together, you'd think they were good brothers and sister, except that all is not what it seems at first glance, because when the two of them are together without anyone else, their relationship instantly grows into something more. In which case, Lisi can't avoid bad rumors about herself, as many people too often see Killian and Lisi standing together and talking constantly. When they have free time, everyone also notices how he only in the presence of this girl begins to smile, and he has a good mood. So it becomes clear what is happening and creates a lot of rumors. The two of them realize this, but they try not to react to such opinions of others, because they believe that no one has the right to decide who should communicate with whom, and who should behave how they should behave. It's time to ask Edith what she thinks about it, and how she feels about Lisi going on a trip with that guy. Although it's weird because how can you ask someone for an opinion if it's only about the person who gets to decide? And in this situation it's Lisi. Everyone was eagerly awaiting her opinion, though it was probably more appropriate to just ask if Lisi herself wanted to do it, and if she agreed to go with the guy, since no one else had the right to decide anything for anyone else. There was only one problem. Edith wanted to know if Lisi wanted to agree to the proposal, and only with her opinion she could answer that question. Would Edith be able to decide instead of the girl whether she should go or not? The strangest thing in this situation was that Lisi listened attentively to what each of them had to say. It was important for her to hear their opinions, but it seemed that her choice would depend on it. And for example, if any of them were against the trip, the impression was that because of that, she might not have gone and would have listened to each of them. Edith didn't even know how best to answer all these questions. She didn't want to embarrass anyone or decide anything with her answer or opinion. She was embarrassed to say anything, because it seemed to her that nobody was going to listen to her opinion, and it wouldn't solve anything. And maybe they asked her just to show that her opinion is important, but it's probably not, and they're just trying to make it look like they really want to spend time with her and socialize. After those stupid questions, she realized that talking that way and saying weird things runs in the family, and after a little while she decided to answer that she didn't care at all. Besides, it was a decision that only Lisi should make, and no one else could do it. None of them had expected such an answer, and were surprised at this. For the first time in a long time, the girl dared to speak out and explain what she really thought. And this truth no one had ever heard from her before, because everyone had hoped that she would say something like that she didn't want to make a decision, or that she would abstain and not say anything at all. That she didn't want to make a decision, or she'd abstain and not say anything at all. But since she was given the opportunity to speak, she decided not to miss the opportunity, and to answer honestly. The girls said that they had overdone it a bit, because it was very strange for them to offer Lisi such a trip, and they had not taken into account many factors that were very important. Such long carriage rides are a hard time for a girl, and she is not even Mr. Cliff's fiancée, so she can say nothing good about this trip together. And it was very strange to suggest such a thing. Besides, he made a very big mistake, and he didn't ask Lisi in the first place if she was okay with it, and he started asking as if he had ignored her opinion and wishes on purpose, so it was very wrong on his part. Each of them seemed to ignore any word and participation in this conversation, as if she was an extra, and could not decide anything, even what concerned her and her decision. She must have been very offended that she was treated like a little child, for whom the parents decide everything, and she has no right to say something, even if she disagrees with something. And Edith noticed it very well, and understood what she was feeling now, because she had been in her place before, and it was happening seriously from the people she had lived with in their house all her life. So she felt very sorry for her, but unfortunately she couldn't solve the situation and help her in any way. Foxy needs to learn to stand up for herself, and make her own decision, and even if someone tries to do it in her place or influence her choice, it should never be allowed, because in time, it can become the norm. And then her opinion, as it actually happens now, no one will take into account, and will allow themselves to decide something for her. Although she is not a little girl, Lisi is an adult and independent girl who knows better what to do and what not to do. Of course, the fact that this situation has happened is very bad, and you will have to put a lot of effort and time to fix it, and it will not happen again, because it is really not normal. But it's still not too late to start fixing things. If this problem is taken seriously, she will do well, and she will never feel superfluous again when someone talks to her and makes a decision for her. The guy who offered the trip started talking about how Edith cared too much about Lisi's comfort, so he started convincing her she had nothing to worry about, and everything will go fine because he'll be there for her, and he'll make sure she gets there and back comfortably. I get the impression that this guy is in love with the girl he proposed traveling with, and it's starting to be noticed by everyone around him. He constantly wants to spend more time with her, and he doesn't even hide his desire to be around her all the time. But he seems to think that no one notices it at all, and he behaves normally enough so no one can suspect anything. When someone was against them being with a girl on a trip, he got very upset, because he didn't think so many people could be against it. And afterward he reflected that perhaps it would have been more proper to ask it of Lisi when no one else could hear it. That guy realized that he originally had to find out from Lisi if she wanted it, and it wasn't at all necessary to find out anyone else's opinion but hers. Evening came, and everyone went about their business, none of them noticing how quickly the time passed, because for the first time, they were all drinking tea together, and there were many topics for conversation. Callian walked by Lisi's room one day. She noticed it and asked why he was walking alone late at night. The girl thought he might have had some unpleasant situation, and was walking around because he couldn't rest easy thinking about it. Callian told her that everything was fine, and he just decided to take a walk because he couldn't sleep since he wasn't too tired for the day. They started talking about the fact that today the Duchess had asked the girls to pick out a dress for her, and after that, she decided to give everyone else a little gift, and they could pick out something for themselves. And today was the day she decided to give something for Lisi and Edith. It was something like a tradition, and all because the Duchess had always dreamed of having a daughter, and probably because of that, she asked the girls to stay behind to pick out their gowns, as if to daughters, for whom she had dreamed of doing this. But for the present she had only sons, and it would be strange to give them dresses, so she chose her helpers and her daughter-in-law to spend her time in this way. She had 2 sons, and because of that she always dreamed of having a daughter to spend all her free time with and fulfill her dream. But unfortunately that didn't happen. Lisi said she was very happy to spend time with his mother, and was always happy to help if she needed encouragement or some assistance. Afterward, the girl told how Edith had not chosen a single dress for herself, and said it would be easy enough to alter an old one. Callian was very much surprised by this, for he had not expected such a thing from his wife, and he was sure that she would not mind such a gift, and would take this chance. But it didn't happen at all as he had imagined. In fact, the girl didn't want to be too cheeky, and only asked for a small request. So she didn't take advantage of his mother's kindness, and said that it wasn't necessarily, but it turns out that he completely misunderstood his wife's act, and even in such a situation, he found something to blame her for. Callian thought that in this way she was trying to protest and show distrust towards their family's clothing designer. So it was certain that she came to the wedding in a dress that was completely different from what the designer would have suggested.